We're going to get started here in just a minute. We've got a couple people logged on, but we'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll get going. Okay, I think we're going to get started. I'm Caroline Vincent with Metro Arts, Director of Public Art, and I have some other friends here with me.
Hi, I'm Jen Cole, the Executive Director at Metro Arts. We're really excited to share this long culmination of a public art community investment plan that lines up with our strategic plan and also the Nashville Next City General Plan. So we're excited to share it with you.
I think we're going to leave it on. Okay, I'm going to share our screen so you can see the presentation. So I'll get started and then we'll have opportunity for questions at the end. We've been on a long journey to get here. We've been working on this plan about 1.5 years with our consultants, Todd Bressie and Meredith McKinley, I think are listening to us. So thank you guys for all of your work, and we're really excited about this plan and everything that's been put into it. So we'll just jump right in. So we're calling this a public art community investment plan. Typically cities do master planning for public art that's very based in geography and where public art might go. But we wanted to shift the idea of public art not just being about citing sculptures, but also about community investment. So this is really what we explored with this plan. So just to talk a little bit about where we've been with public art in Nashville. In 2000, we adopted an ordinance that set aside 1% of capital or certain capital metro projects for public art in Nashville. So we have nearly 50 pieces now in our collection. And this is Light Meander on the Riverfront by Laura Haddad and Tom Drugan, a recent piece. And then, of course, we've been in community centers and libraries quite a bit with our public art. And we have about, I think we're up to 21 bike racks that are designed mostly by Nashville-based artists. I think we have a couple of artists that were outside of our immediate Nashville area. And these are opportunities for artists to sort of apprentice into the public art process. So they submit a design. If selected, that design then comes to Metro, and we have a fabricator on contract who actually builds those in collaboration with the artists. So that's a way to kind of learn about the public art process. And also we've looked at, transit and healthy cities and what we're doing in our city to kind of create multimodal transportation and options for if you want to walk down the street or ride your bike instead of drive your car. So this is a project we did with the 28th Avenue Connector Bridge, artist David Dahlquist. And as part of that project, we did several transit shelters as well. And this project was called Watermarks, which was based on the experiences of those who went through the flood here in Nashville in 2010. So we had 6 different artist commissioned pieces in neighborhoods that were affected by the flood. So that just sort of shows you where we've been, and we'll continue to do those types of projects due to where our funding comes from and the percent ordinance. And those are important, and we want to continue that work. So how we got here with the community investment plan and what we did, we interviewed many different people within the Metro system, as well as our external partners. We had a survey that was public that we received more than 1,000 responses to. We had advisory groups and focus groups that were made up of artists, community members, and those sort of in the arts profession. We also did a report that benchmarked different cities and different programs that we want to aspire to work toward, and things that we felt were inspirational for us. We also tried to sync with other Metro planning processes that were happening. Our plan is very much seated in the recommendations coming out of Nashville Next, out of the Metro Arts Strategic Plan, and also working with like Parks on their plan to play, and In Motion with NTA, and making sure all of these things were kind of coming together to make sure we're not kind of going off the path. And then this process today is the beginning of the public sharing of the recommendations in the plan. So this will be open for about 4 or 5 weeks for public comment. The big ideas coming out of this plan are looking at new tools and types, ways of doing public art that we haven't traditionally focused on. So moving beyond site-specific sculptural pieces into more community-based work, new and stronger relationships with our internal Metro partners and external partners to create a stronger ecosystem for public art in Nashville, and then of course new resources. So we really need to look at how we can diversify our funding so that we can do works that are beyond the permanent site-specific sculptures. These are the 3 values that came out of this plan and out of Metro Arts' strategic plan. We are committed to equity. It's very important to us, and I think that's sort of where we start all of our work and thinking about communities and how we are working. We're committed to artistic practice, so the idea of not only artists, but their practice and their ability to be economically viable, their ability to find affordable housing and studio spaces, sort of their whole holistic ecosystem for the artist. And then the public realm. We really looked at, how is public art coming to this differently than other types of art programming or other work that Metro Arts does. And we really boiled that down to the public realm, which means the common spaces that everyone experiences in their neighborhood or their city, like streets and public squares or community centers and libraries. So we feel like public art can really be a part of that process of designing those spaces and or making them better. So how will we do this? We've looked at lots of different ways, and we sort of organized the plan into these 4 goal areas: strengthening the public art ecosystem, which I'll talk a little bit more about each of these as we go through the slides; fostering deeper cultural and civic participation with all of our work and our projects; catalyzing vibrant creative neighborhoods; and then again supporting the vital public realm. So I'll move through these in more detail as we move forward. What we also found is we need a spectrum of opportunities for artists and new tools for working. So we have, many of you may be familiar with the Thrive program. That's microfunding for artist projects that are $4,000 and under. And then we recently did the Learning Lab, which was artist training program last year that looked at how artists can develop those skills working in communities and doing placemaking and public art projects. And then we feel that there's these gaps that you get to with, what is the next stair step of projects artists are able to do before you get all the way to a site-specific sculpture, which may have a very large budget and have a lot of implications around skill sets like construction management and structural engineering that are things that are learned over time. And if you've done a Thrive project, you might not quite be ready for a site-specific sculptural commission, but we want you to get there. So how do we do that, and how do we move through those stair steps? So the plan looks at the new tools, like I mentioned, for involving artists in public art. So there's 4 that we look at: artist residencies, which means artists working really in depth with communities or at a site, much more process-based than sort of product-oriented. So we'll look at some examples of that. Place-based studios, so artists working in studios in neighborhoods or community centers or libraries, and on a longer term basis. So this wouldn't be, like a week-long process. This might be a 6-month to a year-long situation. And then artists on planning teams. So as Metro is planning for large infrastructure projects or a traffic study or community planning, can we look at having artists on those teams as well as an architect or as well as a landscape architect? And then temporary projects. So we'd really like to figure out a way to do more temporary work in the community. These are great starter projects for artists who haven't done public art before and might be more relevant if we can, do projects that have content that is around maybe a community concern or theme, similar to the Watermark series of artworks that we commissioned, but more of a temporary nature. So this slide just sort of talks about, we have a lot of strategies and tactics that are coming out of this plan, but we know Metro Arts cannot do that alone. We can't do all of this by ourselves. So there's these are sort of broken out into 3 different areas. So leading Metro Arts, that would be a project that we're leading and we own and we're implementing. Partnering is where we're partnering with another department of Metro, another agency, or an external organization to carry out that project. Seed means we might not be, taking on the entire ownership of the project, but we might be the convener, we might be the facilitator, and we might be sort of helping to lead, but not solely being the one in charge of all the parts of the project. So that will be, something to think about as we move through these ideas. So strengthening the public art ecosystem really means looking at the network of artists, arts organizations, fabricators, museums, other entities that can be involved in helping to create a healthy environment for public art. I think we've seen and heard from artists that this is really necessary, and we really need to sort of bolster what's available in our city for artists to be healthy in being able to make public art. So the first way we'll look at that is continuing the Learning Lab, which I mentioned earlier. So we'll probably look at doing another cohort of Learning Lab later this year into next year. And this really looks at artists' skill sets around, like I mentioned, placemaking, public art project management, but also those community-based skills that are, community listening, community engagement practices, and things like that. And equity, Jen said. Artist residencies. This is an example of, many cities have artists in residence to city departments or around city initiatives, and this is something we really want to look at in Metro. So this is a residency that was an artist working directly in the Public Works Department, and some of the projects you're seeing here came out of that, like sidewalk stamping with poetry, and then these really nicely designed traffic stop elements. So I think the idea of an artist being in residence to a department might look like a lot of different things, but I think it'd be great to see, what can an artist sort of affect and how can they be a creative problem solver for civic issues. And we're also thinking about a portable artwork collection. So in the plan, there's a recommendation to acquire artwork by Nashville-based artists. So that would mean, doing a call to artists and then acquiring smaller scale works that could be installed in Metro buildings for the public and for those that are utilizing the building as Metro employees. So these are some examples around fostering deeper cultural and civic participation. This is Bryce McLeod's Our Town project that we supported through the Percent for Art program I guess it's been a couple years ago. But this is really a project that looked at co-creation with the community. Bryce went around on his bike cart and asked citizens of Nashville to create self-portraits. So then this you're seeing here is sort of the manifestation of that on the large scale. So I think we are really interested in these sort of more temporal, more process-driven projects that really look at equity in our community and look at people in the community actually being able to be a part of the art making process. Issue-specific projects, there are many that we're working on currently, but one partnership that we're sort of in the beginning stages of is working with the juvenile court here in Nashville to look at artists on the planning teams for their new facilities and campus. And then we are also, through Metro Arts, doing a restorative justice training program for artists. So I think we really want to look at, what are some issues in the city that we'd like to address via artists and via, an art making process. This is an example of a place-based studio in Philadelphia. So you can see artists working in the, actually making artwork with citizens in a space that's, in the community, open to the public. I think we are really interested in this idea for maybe libraries or community centers or other neighborhood spaces that are existing and maybe underutilized. creative neighborhoods. This is Courtney Adair Johnson's project in North Nashville, which started with mapping Magruder, which was sort of an asset-based or asset mapping process, looking at, what are the assets existing in the neighborhood, and then they created some programming and projects around that. She's continued this residency, which is in a old school building in the neighborhood. That's a Catholic Charities site, and is continuing to do artist workshops and artist classes for kids in the neighborhood. So these are the types of things that are clearly not a public art object, but are very important to community building and facilitating art making. This is an example of sort of a mural explosion in North Nashville led by artist Jay Jenkins, and we have supported this through a Thrive project early on, but this has continued in building sort of an artist collective in that neighborhood that's really looking at how public art can transform their neighborhood. And of course, we'll continue to work with parks and neighborhood spaces to create these opportunities for sculptures and sort of implementing things in those areas. This is Edmondson Park on Charlotte Avenue, The Gathering by Sherry Warner Hunter. And then playgrounds, what the idea of sort of artist design playgrounds or other elements that we have in our public realm that could be, have an artist involved in the design. The vital public realm, lately we've had a lot of conversations with transportation planners and around transit and how can we bring art into that infrastructure process. So we would like to look at, pulling together the metro agencies and maybe some of the external partners who are working toward, different infrastructure projects like this and asking questions around, policy and how can we make this an easier process to have art in sidewalks, in transit shelters, are there retaining walls that need a mural and that kind of thing. So we'd like to sort of make a pathway that's a little bit clearer, because I think internally for Metro as well as externally, if a community group or business wants to sort of sponsor something like this, how do they do that, and what's the pathway? What is the permitting process and implications for that? Activating underused spaces. This is a great example from Atlanta. It looks like just a downtown area that needed a little light and probably a temporary project. This is artists again on planning. The idea of artists coming together and facilitating community conversations around, shaping city projects, sort of giving community agency to decide what do we need in this space. And artists are really great at facilitating those conversations. So we'd love to see that happening more and more. Public art and private development, we have studied this quite a bit with Metro Planning and looked at, how are ways that we can make an easier pathway again for policy and just sort of a process for people like developers who come to us and say, hey, I want to do public art in my project, but I don't really know how. I don't know, how do I find an artist? How much is it going to cost? What are these ways we can sort of answer those questions and create an easier way for public art to happen in private development, which right now there just isn't a clear pathway. So I think we'll be looking at convening a work group around that issue with private developers, with Metro partners, and then ultimately having a resource center where you can go and kind of find out that information. Collections management, this is something we've really been thinking about as our collection grows, sort of assessing what we have, what we've commissioned, and also what else is out there in the Metro land. There's other sculptures and art objects that have been commissioned over the years that may or may not have had regular maintenance. So we would like to look at assessing what we own and then prioritizing the maintenance of that and looking at funding sources for that work. So this, we're back to just sort of summarizing all of this. New tools is what we're looking at. New relationships, better, stronger relationships with our stakeholders and Metro agency partners, and hopefully flexible funding sources. So then you see the spectrum of opportunities starts to fill in with community studios, residencies, public art and private development, temporary projects. So as an artist coming to this, coming to Metro Arts and saying like, how do I get involved or what can I do? You have many ways of doing your work, and then also sort of climbing the stair step of projects and learning skills that can help get to that site-specific sculptural project. So just again, the tools we're looking at, new relationships. This would be sort of a sample look at our funding. Right now, we're solely funded through Percent for Art ordinance, which has been really great, and we've had a really amazing run with support for that program, and we'll continue that. But we would like to look at, how can we sort of build this other part of the pie, which is, money that we could come in our operational side that could support temporary artwork projects, these residencies, studios, artist training, and then again, the maintenance of our collection and what we do have, and taking care of that on an annual basis so that it doesn't become, a huge burden to restore a piece that's not been taken care of. So this looks at year one priorities and sort of the work plan for the next couple of years, and I've broken it up into the lead partner seeds. So this idea of portable collection. We've looked at Thrive and how can we create potentially a public art track within Thrive that supports perhaps larger budgets for projects, but also a little more project management and coaching help to get those projects to happen. Of course, projects geared to Nashville-based artists. We're also interested in a mentorship program that looks at, when we're commissioning a large-scale Percent project, can we also require or, ask that artist to mentor a local artist, and so that they are sort of learning some skills around public art, the profession, and how to do that work. Mural Assistance Center, which is sort of related to the Private Developer Resource Center, but the idea of, if you want to do a mural right now, there's not a clear pathway, there's not a permit per se, but there's not a lot of information pulled together about how to do that and what are the do's and the don'ts for, painting a mural in your neighborhood. Of course, we want to do these artist residencies. We want to continue the learning lab, collections management, this transportation kit of parts. So those would all involve pretty heavy partnerships with others in our community, and then seeding the Private Developer Resource Center and perhaps artist residencies in other organizations. We want to sort of act as a technical resource for others in the community who can commission art also. We don't want to be the only ones. Moving forward, sort of back to that idea of the ecosystem, we would like to see more public art, more artists who are able to do this work, more businesses that are commissioning artwork, and sort of create more of a holistic environment for this work. So that is, I think, the end of the presentation. If we want to see if there are questions, or Jen, did you want to add anything I didn't say?
Well, I think at the very macro level, what Metro Arts seeks to do with this plan is to make art in service to our community in a different kind of way and in a broader set of relationships and project types. We believe public art really is a tool for community, neighborhood, and artist development. And we believe that in order to do that, we need to sort of make some of these pivots and shifts, both in our funding types, our project types, and our relationship types, so that public art really is sort of a vital and relevant part of everybody's citizen and resident experience here in Nashville. We're really excited about this. We think it answers many questions sort of posed in the arts and culture, creative economy questions in Nashville Next. And we believe it really listens to kind of artists and neighborhoods in our community and kind of what they need and want to move forward. At the end of the day, if we're successful in this, we believe in 10, 15, 20 years, Nashville will really be seen as a national and international leader in sort of the development of kind of artist-centered community, artist-anchored and artist-centered communities. So, yeah, happy to take any questions. Yes.
Yeah. If we can hang out for a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions, but also you can email us, publicart@nashville.gov. Or there's also, by Monday, will be a feedback form on our website, which the shortened URL for that is publicart.nashville.gov. And there will be the full plan, documents, and a lot more information posted there as well. Okay, well, I don't see any live chat questions right now, so we'll just leave this up and hope to hear from you via email. Though we'll also have a social media campaign starting next week of just some conversations and sharing of this information. So yeah, let's hear from you, your thoughts and feedback on the recommendations found here. Thank you for your time, and hopefully see you around.